She demanded I patiently wait for her while she dated other guys, so I said goodbye and meant it. What I didn't expect was how desperately she'd try to track me down when her backup plan finally moved on. I'm Marcus, 28, and I work as an insurance adjuster in Tampa. Not the most exciting job, but it pays well and gives me the stability I've always valued. For 4 years, I thought I had built something solid with Chloe, a 26-year-old receptionist at a local veterinary clinic. We weren't the flashiest couple, but we had real plans together. Weekend trips to Clearwater Beach, saving up for a down payment on a house, talking about getting engaged after she finished her certification program. I liked our predictable rhythm, Sunday morning farmers markets where we'd sample honey and buy fresh flowers for our kitchen table, cooking dinner together during the week while she told me stories about the animals she'd helped that day, Netflix binges where we'd actually watch the shows instead of scrolling our phones. Chloe seemed happy with our life too, always talking about the little house with a yard she wanted for her future rescue dogs, how she loved that I remembered to DVR her veterinary shows, the way I'd bring her coffee on her early shifts when she had to open the clinic. She'd curl up against me during our evening walks around the neighborhood, pointing out houses she liked, discussing which ones had good potential for the dogs she wanted to foster someday. I was saving steadily for an engagement ring, had even started browsing jewelry stores during my lunch breaks, imagining the moment I'd propose on the beach where we'd had our first real conversation about the future we wanted to build together. Our relationship felt like a comfortable sweater, not flashy, but warm and reliable, the kind of thing you reach for when you want to feel safe. Then Sterling and Associates happened, and everything I thought I knew about the woman I loved started unraveling faster than a bad insurance claim. When Chloe landed a position at this high-end real estate firm that specialized in luxury waterfront properties, I was genuinely proud of her. She'd been stuck answering phones at the vet clinic for 3 years, dealing with anxious pet owners calling about their sick cats at 6 in the morning and barely making above minimum wage despite her natural talent for calming people down in crisis situations. This was her chance to use her people skills in a field that actually paid commissions, to finally earn the kind of money that would accelerate our savings goals and maybe let us take that honeymoon in Greece we'd been planning. I even helped her pick out her interview outfit, lending her money for professional headshots when she said it would help her land bigger clients, driving her to the office for her final interview because she was too nervous to trust herself behind the wheel. The changes started small but accelerated like a car rolling downhill. She traded her comfortable scrubs for tailored blazers that cost more than I spent on groceries in a month, suddenly needed professional makeup that required a separate budget line item, and began carrying herself differently, shoulders back, chin up, like she was practicing being someone more important. She started using phrases like market disruption and lifestyle curation in regular conversation, words that sounded rehearsed, like she was practicing for some test I didn't know about. Her phone buzzed constantly with work messages, even during our dinner dates, and she'd apologize while typing responses about showings and client needs, her attention split between me and this new world that seemed to demand all of her mental energy. At first, I thought it was just professional growth, the natural evolution of someone taking their career seriously for the first time in years. But within a month, everything felt different in ways I couldn't quite articulate. She'd come home from work energized in a way I'd never seen, talking about client dinners at restaurants I couldn't pronounce and team meetings that ran until 10 p.m., describing a workplace culture that sounded more like a social club than a real estate office. The woman who used to fall asleep watching Discovery Channel documentaries was suddenly too wired to settle down before midnight, scrolling through luxury property listings and industry newsletters until the early morning hours, muttering about market trends and investment opportunities I'd never heard her express interest in before. She started questioning things that had never been issues before, why we always went to the same restaurants instead of trying places that might expand our network, why I was content with my current position when there were obviously opportunities to climb higher, why we spent so many weekends at home instead of attending networking events where we could meet more successful people. "Don't you want more from life?" she asked one evening while I was grilling burgers on our apartment balcony, the same balcony where she used to say she felt luckiest watching the sunset with me and planning our future together. The question hit me wrong because it implied our life together wasn't enough, that 4 years of building something steady was somehow settling for less than we deserved. She began comparing our relationship to her new coworkers' lifestyles, mentioning how her team leader drove a Porsche and took spontaneous trips to Key West, how her colleague Sarah was dating 3 different guys and loving the excitement of keeping her options open, How everyone at Sterling seemed to be living these dynamic, adventure-filled lives that made our quiet evenings feel ordinary and small. I realized later that her new colleagues had been feeding her a completely different philosophy about relationships, success, and what young people should be doing with their lives, but at the time, I just felt confused about when contentment had become a character flaw, when stability had become synonymous with boring, when the future we'd planned together had started feeling like a prison she wanted to escape. The name Logan Pierce started appearing in Chloe's conversations like a song stuck on repeat, and I should have paid closer attention to the reverent way she said it. Logan was her team leader at Sterling & Associates, a 36-year-old divorced real estate mogul who drove a silver Porsche 911 and seemed to treat the Tampa luxury market like his personal playground. According to Chloe, Logan had closed over $15 million in sales the previous year, owned a waterfront condo in Hyde Park with floor-to-ceiling windows overlooking the bay, and maintained the kind of lifestyle that appeared effortless but probably cost more than I made in 2 years. What I didn't realize was that Logan Pierce was systematically dismantling my relationship from the inside out, one philosophical conversation at a time, using the kind of manipulation techniques that would make a cult leader proud. It started with innocent mentions during dinner, how Logan had shared insights about market timing during their team meeting, how he'd recommended a book about maximizing personal potential that everyone successful should read, how he'd explained that successful people think differently about commitment and opportunity than average folks do. Chloe would relay these conversations with the enthusiasm of someone who discovered a new religion, hanging on every word this man said like he was dispensing wisdom from Mount Sinai instead of real estate advice from a conference room. Logan says that people who commit too young often miss out on discovering their true potential. She mentioned one evening while we were folding laundry, a domestic task that suddenly seemed to bore her in ways it never had before. He thinks traditional relationships can be limiting if both people aren't growing at the same pace or pushing each other toward bigger goals. I looked up from matching socks, sensing something dangerous in the casual way she delivered this observation, like she was testing the waters to see how I'd react. What does that mean exactly? Just that maybe we're supposed to explore more before we settle down permanently. Logan dated around until he was 34, experiencing different types of connections and learning what he really needed in a partner, and he says it made him a much better husband when he finally got married. The fact that Logan's marriage had ended in an expensive divorce just 2 years later seemed completely lost on her, but I didn't point out that particular irony yet. Logan's influence grew stronger through months of after-work conversations and team dinners that stretched later and later into the evening, events that seemed to blur the line between professional development and social manipulation. Chloe would come home energized by discussions about personal growth, financial freedom, and what she called maximizing life experiences, concepts that sounded like self-help book titles rather than actual relationship advice. She started questioning whether people in their 20s should be making long-term commitments when there was so much world to explore, so many potential connections to discover, so many versions of themselves they hadn't tested yet in different relationship dynamics. Logan apparently had a well-developed theory that monogamy was an outdated social construct that prevented people from reaching their full potential, especially successful people who had more options than the average person and shouldn't limit themselves out of conventional thinking. Think about it. Chloe said one night after returning from what she called a strategic dinner with potential clients, though I noticed she'd been drinking wine and her lipstick was completely gone, replaced by what looked like nervous energy. Logan's weekend yacht parties include doctors, lawyers, entrepreneurs, people who are actually building something significant with their lives. Meanwhile, we're home watching Netflix and talking about getting a dog like we're already retired. The comparison stung because it was clearly deliberate, designed to make our life together seem small and unambitious compared to Logan's sophisticated social circle of high achievers who apparently never settled for ordinary. I'd started noticing that Chloe's phone buzzed with text messages at all hours, messages she'd glance at quickly before putting the phone face down on the table with a secretive expression I'd never seen before. When I asked about the constant contact, she explained that Logan preferred to communicate directly with his team rather than going through formal channels, that he believed in building personal relationships that transcended typical workplace boundaries and created deeper loyalty. It's mentorship, she said when I pointed out that her mentors seemed to text her at midnight about things that didn't sound remotely work-related. Logan invests in people he sees real potential in. He's teaching me how to think bigger, how to position myself for real success instead of just accepting whatever life hands me and calling it enough. The real revelation came when I discovered text messages between them dating back 2 months, conversations that revealed just how long Logan had been working to reshape Chloe's perspective on our relationship and her future possibilities. I wasn't snooping intentionally. Her phone had been buzzing incessantly during a movie, and she'd asked me to check if it was something important while she was in the bathroom dealing with what she claimed was an upset stomach. What I found were months of carefully crafted messages designed to plant seeds of doubt about everything we'd built together, a systematic psychological campaign that would have impressed professional manipulators. Logan had been telling her that people who commit young often experience severe FOMO later in life when they realize what they've missed, that successful individuals always keep their options open to maximize opportunities, that she was too dynamic and attractive to limit herself to one person during what should be her prime exploration years. He'd been framing our stable, committed relationship as a limitation on her potential rather than a foundation for growth, suggesting that she was settling for comfort and familiarity instead of pursuing the greatness she deserved. The messages revealed a systematic campaign to convince Chloe that traditional monogamy was holding her back from discovering her true self and achieving the kind of life that someone with her looks and intelligence should naturally expect. Logan had been positioning himself as the enlightened alternative, the man who understood that modern women shouldn't have to choose between love and personal growth, who believed that exploring multiple connections simultaneously was actually healthier and more honest than committing to one person out of fear, convention, or limited thinking. By the time I understood what was happening, Logan had already convinced Chloe that wanting exclusivity was a sign of insecurity and controlling behavior, that truly confident people didn't need to control their partner's choices, and that she owed it to herself to explore what else was possible before making any permanent decisions about a future that might be smaller than what she could achieve. After Chloe delivered her ultimatum about wanting to explore other connections, while keeping me as her safety net, I executed a complete digital erasure strategy that would have impressed a witness protection specialist. Within 12 hours of her telling me she needed me to patiently wait while she figured out what she really wanted, I had blocked her across every social media platform, changed my phone number, updated my relationship status on dating apps to single, and systematically removed every trace of our 4-year relationship from my online presence. I deleted hundreds of photos, untagged myself from her posts, and even changed my Netflix password since she'd been using my account to watch her reality TV shows. The panic began within hours as Chloe discovered she had no way to monitor my reaction, gauge my emotional state, or maintain the kind of contact that would let her control the narrative of our breakup. I found out later through mutual friends that she tried calling my old number repeatedly, getting increasingly frantic when she realized it had been disconnected, then frantically checking all my social media accounts only to discover she'd been completely blocked everywhere. She created fake Instagram accounts using variations of her name, had friends call my workplace claiming to be potential clients who needed to reach me urgently, and even visited my favorite coffee shop multiple times hoping for an accidental encounter that would give her a chance to explain herself or at least see how I was handling her decision. Her desperation escalated when she realized her backup plan had completely disappeared, leaving her with only Logan's attention and no guarantee that his interest would extend beyond the thrill of the chase. I learned through my coworker Dave, who was friends with Chloe's roommate Ashley, that she'd spent the first week after our breakup obsessively checking my social media through other people's accounts, trying to piece together clues about my mental state, my social activities, and whether I was already moving on with someone else. She'd apparently convinced herself that I would spend weeks or even months trying to win her back, that my devastation would be so complete and obvious that Logan would see her as someone worth fighting for, someone who inspired that kind of devotion in stable, dependable men. Instead, my complete digital silence was driving her crazy because she had no idea if I was falling apart, getting therapy, dating other people, or simply moving on with my life like our 4 years together had meant nothing significant. The fact that I wasn't begging, pleading, or even acknowledging her decision was apparently more disturbing to her than if I'd shown up at her workplace making dramatic scenes or sending long emotional texts about how much I needed her. She'd expected heartbreak, desperation, maybe even some kind of romantic gesture that would prove to Logan how much she was valued, but instead got complete indifference that made her question whether our relationship had ever meant as much to me as it had to her. Ashley reported that Chloe was staying up late scrolling through old photos of us, trying to analyze whether I'd ever really loved her or if I was just more emotionally detached than she'd realized, wondering if maybe Logan was right about her overestimating the significance of our connection. The silence was eating at her because it gave her no ammunition to use in conversations with Logan, no dramatic stories about a devastated ex-boyfriend who couldn't handle losing her, no evidence that she was the kind of woman men fought for rather than simply walked away from when she made herself unavailable. My complete disappearance from her life had turned her grand gesture of independence into a lonely reality where she was starting to realize that having options didn't automatically make you valuable to the people who actually mattered. Logan's interest in Chloe evaporated faster than morning dew once he realized she had blown up her stable relationship for him, and the transformation from confident mentor to dismissive player was both swift and brutal. What Logan had found attractive was the challenge of seducing someone who was supposedly committed to another man, the thrill of winning a competition he'd created in his own mind, but a single, available Chloe desperate for his validation held absolutely no appeal for someone who thrived on conquest rather than commitment. The first sign came when Chloe tried to define their relationship after our breakup, expecting the deeper connection he'd promised during all those late-night conversations about modern relationships and personal growth. "What are we doing here, Logan?" she asked during what she thought was a romantic dinner, only to watch his expression shift from charming to cold in the span of seconds. "We're having fun, Chloe. That's what this is about. Fun, exploration, keeping things light and exciting without all the heavy relationship drama." He began openly flirting with newer team members right in front of her, treating the young marketing coordinator Emma like she was the most fascinating person in the office while dismissing Chloe's attempts to engage him in the philosophical discussions that had once seemed so important to him. When Chloe confronted him about his obvious interest in Emma, Logan delivered the reality check she should have seen coming months earlier. "I never promised you exclusivity, Chloe. That's exactly the kind of conventional thinking I've been trying to help you move beyond. Mature people can appreciate multiple connections without getting possessive or clingy about it." The man who had spent months convincing her that successful people keep their options open was now using that exact philosophy to justify treating her like just another option in his rotation, someone he could enjoy when convenient but dismiss when something more interesting came along. Chloe's work performance plummeted as she became obsessed with winning Logan back, missing client appointments because she was too busy analyzing his interactions with other women, making errors on important contracts because her attention was completely consumed by trying to decode his mixed signals. She started staying late at the office hoping for private moments that never came, volunteering for weekend events where Logan might be present, and positioning herself in his line of sight during meetings like a teenager with a hopeless crush. Her colleagues grew tired of the workplace drama she was creating, the tension that followed her around like a dark cloud, the way she'd monopolize conversations trying to get Logan's attention or create artificial reasons to collaborate with him on projects. The professional reputation she'd worked so hard to build was crumbling as people began to see her as the office drama queen rather than the competent agent she'd once been. The final blow came when she was eventually terminated for unprofessional conduct after confronting Logan's new interest Emma during a client meeting, creating such an uncomfortable scene that the potential buyers walked out without signing the contract that would have netted the company a six-figure commission. "This is exactly why I don't get involved with people who can't handle adult relationships," Logan told her during the termination meeting, his voice carrying the same patronizing tone he'd once used to criticize traditional monogamy. "You've proven that some people just aren't ready for the kind of sophisticated arrangement we discussed." Chloe was escorted from the building that same afternoon, her dreams of luxury real estate success ending in the most humiliating way possible, with Logan watching from his office window as security walked her to her car with a box of personal belongings. The man who had convinced her to throw away 4 years of stability for the promise of something better had discarded her the moment she became inconvenient, leaving her unemployed, relationshipless, and facing the reality that everything I had represented, loyalty, consistency, genuine care, was exactly what she'd lost in pursuit of an illusion that had never been real. I began attending therapy and joined the Tampa Bay Sailing Club, discovering passions I had neglected during my years of managing Chloe's high-maintenance lifestyle and constant need for validation. Dr. Sarah Martinez, my therapist, helped me understand that I'd been carrying the emotional weight of 2 people in our relationship, always anticipating Chloe's needs, managing her moods, and making myself smaller to accommodate her growing demands for excitement and status. You've been living like a supporting character in your own life, she observed during one of our sessions, words that hit harder than I expected because they were absolutely true. For 4 years, I'd been so focused on being the perfect boyfriend for someone who was never satisfied that I'd forgotten what actually made me happy beyond making her happy. The sailing club became my sanctuary, a place where I could focus on the simple pleasure of working with wind and water, of learning knots and navigation, of being part of a community that valued skill and teamwork over flash and status. I reconnected with college friends who commented on how much happier and more relaxed I seemed without the constant stress of trying to keep up with Chloe's escalating expectations and social comparisons. "Dude, you're actually laughing again," my friend Mike observed during a barbecue at his place, and I realized he was right. I'd forgotten how good it felt to enjoy simple pleasures without someone critiquing them as boring or insufficient. Through the sailing club, I met Kelly, a 29-year-old marine biology graduate student who shared my love for the ocean and appreciated quiet evenings discussing books, future goals, and the kind of life we wanted to build rather than the lifestyle we wanted to project. Kelly was different from Chloe in every way that mattered. She insisted on splitting expenses for dates, had her own established friend group that didn't revolve around networking or social climbing, and made me feel valued for who I was rather than what I could provide or how I made her look to other people. "I love how present you are," she told me one evening as we watched the sunset from her apartment balcony, a simple observation that reminded me how exhausting it had been to constantly compete with Chloe's phone, her work drama, and her endless comparisons to other people's lives. Kelly never needed me to prove my worth through expensive dinners or elaborate gestures. She was genuinely content with beach walks, cooking together, and conversations that lasted hours without either of us checking social media or worrying about appearing successful to outside observers. When I posted a photo of Kelly and me at a regatta 6 months later, just a simple picture of us laughing together in matching sailing team shirts, it triggered a massive emotional breakdown from Chloe, who had been monitoring my life through mutual friends and apparently hadn't expected me to move on so completely or so happily. Ashley later told me that Chloe had spent an entire evening crying and calling me heartless for replacing her so easily, convinced that my ability to find happiness without her proved I'd never really loved her the way she thought I had. The irony wasn't lost on me that the woman who had wanted to explore her options while keeping me as a backup was devastated to discover I'd found someone who actually wanted to be with me, someone who saw our relationship as an opportunity to build something together rather than a safety net to fall back on when more exciting options didn't work out. Kelly and I started talking about moving in together, planning trips to marine research stations where she could pursue her doctorate work, discussing the kind of future that felt both ambitious and achievable because it was based on shared values rather than Instagram-worthy appearances. Chloe's attempts to regain contact became increasingly desperate and manipulative, escalating from casual social media stalking to behavior that genuinely concerned the people around her. She started showing up at my apartment complex, lurking in the parking lot hoping to catch me coming or going, sometimes sitting in her car for hours until other residents began to notice and feel uncomfortable about the strange woman who seemed to be surveilling the building. When direct confrontation failed, she switched tactics and began sending expensive gifts with handwritten letters. A $200 bottle of wine with a note about how it reminded her of our first anniversary, a leather portfolio for work with a card saying she'd always believed in my potential, flowers delivered to my office with messages about how sorry she was for not appreciating what we had. I returned everything unopened, but she persisted, apparently convinced that the right gesture would crack my resolve and remind me of what we'd once shared. Her behavior became more concerning when she started contacting my family members with fabricated stories about being worried about my mental health, calling my mother to express concern that I was isolating myself and might be having a breakdown that required intervention from people who cared about me. "Marcus seems so different," she told my mom during a phone call that left my mother confused and worried. "He won't talk to any of his old friends, and I'm scared he might be struggling with depression or something worse. I just think someone should check on him." The manipulation was sophisticated and calculated. She knew my mother would be alarmed by suggestions that I was suffering emotionally, and she positioned herself as the concerned ex-girlfriend who only wanted what was best for me despite our breakup. When my mother called me in a panic, asking if I was okay and suggesting I might benefit from talking to someone professional, I had to explain the real situation and assure her that I was actually happier and healthier than I'd been in years. The most disturbing escalation came when Chloe began posting cryptic messages on social media that seemed designed to suggest she was having thoughts of self-harm, status updates about feeling abandoned, and questioning whether life was worth living when the people you love most can just walk away without looking back. Some people can just turn off their feelings like a light switch, she posted on Instagram alongside a black and white photo of herself looking distressed. I guess I'm not built that way. Maybe caring too much is my biggest flaw. Instead of falling for the emotional blackmail and breaking my no-contact boundary to rescue her, I took screenshots of the concerning posts and contacted Chloe's parents directly, explaining the situation and my worry that she might be using threats of self-harm to manipulate me into responding to her attempts at contact. Her parents immediately had her evaluated by mental health professionals, and the manipulative social media posts disappeared within 48 hours, though she remained furious that I had involved crisis intervention services rather than rushing to her side like the devoted ex-boyfriend she'd expected me to be. The professional evaluation revealed what I'd suspected. Her threats were manipulative rather than genuine, designed to create a crisis that would force me to break my silence and engage with her emotionally, but the intervention had the opposite effect of what she'd hoped. Instead of proving that I still cared enough to be worried about her well-being, my response demonstrated that I cared enough to get her proper help while maintaining the boundaries that protected both of us from further drama. A year later at our mutual friend Dave's beach wedding in Clearwater, Chloe appeared with an obvious fake boyfriend named Trevor, a nervous man who she claimed was a successful tech entrepreneur, but who clearly had no idea what he was supposed to be selling. I spotted them during the cocktail hour, Chloe overdressed in a designer dress that probably cost more than her unemployment benefits, clinging to this poor guy's arm while shooting glances in my direction to see if I was watching her grand performance. Trevor looked deeply uncomfortable, constantly checking his phone and fidgeting with his tie like he'd rather be anywhere else, while Chloe kept making loud comments about their upcoming trip to Napa Valley and his latest business acquisition that sounded suspiciously vague and rehearsed. Trevor just closed a major deal with a Fortune 500 company, she announced to anyone within earshot, while Trevor's face showed the panic of someone who'd been given a script he couldn't remember. During a quiet moment when Kelly was chatting with the bride's family, Chloe approached me alone, her fake confidence crumbling the moment she was away from her hired audience. "Marcus, can we talk for a minute?" she asked, her voice smaller than I'd heard it in years, the bravado she'd been performing all evening completely gone. "I need to tell you something." I followed her to a quieter section of the beach, curious about what confession was coming but already knowing it wouldn't change anything between us. "Trevor isn't my boyfriend," she admitted, tears starting to flow as the weight of her deception became too much to maintain. "I hired him through an acting agency because I couldn't stand the thought of coming to this wedding alone, knowing you'd be here with her, looking so happy and settled." The desperation in her voice was genuine now, stripped of all the manipulation and performance that had characterized her behavior for the past year. "I thought if you saw me with someone successful, someone who seemed like he could give me the lifestyle I thought I wanted, maybe you'd realize what you'd lost and fight for me." She broke down completely, admitting that Logan had used her exactly as I'd predicted, that she'd thrown away the best relationship of her life chasing an illusion that had never been real, that she'd been watching my social media through friends' accounts and torturing herself with evidence of my happiness with Kelly. "I know I hurt you," she sobbed. "I know I threw away something real for something that was never going to last. But I was stupid and scared, and I thought I deserved more than what we had, and now I see that what we had was everything I actually needed." I remained compassionate but firm in my boundaries, offering her a tissue but not the reconciliation she was hoping for. "I'm sorry you're struggling, Chloe, but you made your choice and I've made mine. You can't undo 4 years of growth and healing because you realize the grass wasn't greener." Kelly appeared beside me then, handling the awkward situation with remarkable grace and maturity, even offering Chloe genuine sympathy for her obvious pain without feeling threatened or territorial. "I hope you find what you're looking for," Kelly told her kindly, taking my hand as we walked back toward the reception where our friends were celebrating love that was real, committed, and built on mutual respect rather than manipulation and regret. The story concluded 6 months later with Kelly and my engagement announcement, a simple post about our plans to build a life together, which prompted Chloe's final bitter text message expressing disbelief that I had moved on so easily from our 4 years together, completely missing the irony that she was the one who had moved on first, only to discover that moving on and moving up weren't the same thing.